Hi, welcome to the Smyrna School District's MLL Teacher Leader Academy presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Denise Torres Ruiz. I am one of the MLL teachers in the Smyrna School District, and this is my first year in this position.
And I'm Karen Coverdale, and I have been in the district for about 13 years, and I switched to MLL about 3 years ago.
Alright, so let's start by taking a look at our statistics in our district. As you can see, our numbers are smaller compared to other districts, but we are growing definitely. Having 67 students at the high school allows us to support our students more and just build stronger connections overall.
And as you can see, we have a lot of different languages in the district. However, most of our students speak either Spanish, French, or probably Haitian Creole. And now we have some MLL supports. So the Smyrna School District, several years ago, instituted a grading policy for our MLL students. So if the students have attended U.S. schools for 3 years or less, they will qualify. And because of the language proficiency, interfering with their ability in classes, they can earn an S for satisfactory or a U for unsatisfactory in their classes. So the S, they can receive that even if they are doing modified or partial assignments, but they are extending effort and are trying their best in the class. A U can be earned if there's no effort or attempt to do anything basically in the class. Okay? And they are supposed to record their actual grades in the grade book, and then from the end of the marking periods and the end of the year, we adjust the grade to the S or U.
All right, and for another support, we have the language development classes. And this is a breakdown of our language development class, which is structured to support our MLL students at 3 different levels based on their access scores, years in the U.S., or by teacher observation. In this case, Ms. Coverdale has been doing that.
All right, and then kind of a comparison of last year and this year. So last year, I was the only MLL teacher at the high school, so I had 6 English language development classes and was not able to push in much other than on my planning to help other teachers. I helped when I could. We had a very large population of beginners last year, so those 2 classes were very large for one person. This year, Ms. Torres has joined us part-time. She works at another school as well, and so there are both of us here. She is able to do push-in support for some of our beginner students, and we do have smaller beginner classes size-wise this year. We didn't have quite as many registering throughout the year, but we both teach those beginner classes.
And just as Ms. Coverdale mentioned, the pushing in started this year. So this is just support offered at the high school level, and it's mainly with our beginner level class. But we often do get also other students who ask for help. This year we've been focusing on math, so Algebra I II, geometry, and all levels of English. We did face some difficulties as we showed up to the teacher's classroom and they just were like, what are you doing here type of thing. But throughout the year, we just try to explain that we're here to help and not to make more work.
So now, most teachers know we are here to help, and we do have a lot of teachers that are starting to reach out to us when needed. We've had a lot of social studies teachers and some science teachers starting to reach out. We've been able to have access to materials. We've asked to be put on their Google Classrooms. We've been given pacing guides for math, as well as access to teacher and student materials for math. In the future here at the high school, we have talked to administration about being part of the PLCs. We are going to be hopefully in closer contact with some of the teachers to know truly where they are in the curriculum so that we can help maybe scaffold or accommodate the tests prior to the students taking them, and to help where we can. We also want to be able to present at the beginning of the year during a staff meeting to explain our MLL world and what we are doing.
So, what is the problem? As I started to show up to the classrooms, I noticed that students were all in the back and not engaged in the lessons. So, our goal is to help teachers become more familiar with the illustrative math, built-in supports for MLL, along with recommendations that myself or Ms. Coverdell offer.
Okay, we've had some challenges. There's several long-term subs in the math department, and so that affects, our MLL population, but it also affects all students as well. There's some inconsistency. They have trouble building relationships when, you're not there maybe for the entire year. The supports and accountability, the curriculum knowledge, and just sometimes not familiar with some of the teaching strategies that an experienced teacher would have.
Another challenge is just the turnover, which we know is everywhere. This affects because many of the teachers are still becoming familiar with the curriculum, so just to go along with their other challenges.
So, Smyrna School District uses the Illustrative Mathematics curriculum, and we have Algebra I for 9th grade, Geometry in 10th grade, and Algebra II for 11th grade.
And so for the routines that are in here, we have stronger and clearer each time, which is students share their answer with a partner to get feedback and then go back to their original answer and improve it. We have collect and display, which the teacher listens to the student's discussion while there is like whole group, partner, and then writes them down to display it in the classroom for students to reference throughout the lesson. Clarity, critique, and collect is students rewrite a math answer that is not correct. And then information gap is each student is giving a part of the math concept and they work together to put all the pieces together and find the question and the answer.
Okay, we have co-craft questions. Students take a math answer and they create a problem that could be the result of that answer. We have 3 reads, and this is where they go back. In the first read, you just kind of get the gist of what what's being said. The second read, you can go through and find like some of the important terms, numbers, and then the third read you can go and what are you actually supposed to do here with this problem. Compare and connect. They identify, compare, and contrast their own understanding with that of others, and then can make connections. And then discussion supports. A lot of times that is visuals, and that can be sentence frames to get students started.
And just why do we have MLRs in math? Is these routines are just designed to support all students, but more especially our MLLs. Teachers can use these routines to help our MLLs be more engaged and part of the lesson. And so for geometry, I decided to do lesson 12 from unit 5 to take a deeper look at the MLRs and how in this lesson we can accommodate and use those for our students. And just for a summary of this lesson is that the students discovered the differences between prisms and pyramids, and they also learned about the terms oblique and right and how it applies to cones and some pyramids. This is just some vocabulary that as we look into the lesson, I am able to say like, hey, maybe our MLL students won't be able to know what these terms are. And so the goals and targets is just to compare and contrast, which is something that our students might be a little unfamiliar with, as well as like relationships, it's like connections, and so on and therefore. So the warm-up is the faces of geometry. I added the names of the solid shapes, so like if you look at the original, it's just A, B, and C, and I went ahead and added the names. And even if the teacher decides to do this only for students. It's not like we're not expecting for them to do it for everyone, but at least for students. And then so it says draw all the surfaces of each solid. So like draw all the shapes that make up each solid instead of using a surface. And then maybe for this activity, it would be beneficial if the teacher can provide like shape tiles of some sort so the students can have that visual in front of them. And so that's basically what I just went over, if you want to read over it. And so I would recommend to the teacher to do one of them with them. In this case, I decided to go with A. So like explain it and say like, okay, what shape did I need to start this, and then what other shapes do I need to make this pyramid a pyramid. And then so we just draw the square, we say we have 4 triangles, and then name, obviously again, each individual shape. And then just make sure you explicitly say like it's your turn. Now what shapes do you think we need to make the other 2? And so for card sorting, this is where the words oblique and right come into the lesson. So this activity asks students to sort cards with different shapes in the groups of 2 categories of their choosing and being able to explain the 2 groups twice. So this is a great activity for MLL students because even if they don't have that academic vocabulary, they can still be a part of the conversation by simply saying, okay, this is maybe just a triangle, this is maybe just a rectangle, or maybe this just has the same shape or it looks the same. And just for reference, if we go to the next slide, you're able to see the cards that they were working with, and then these were the rest of them. And so here the objective of this is for them to say, this is my oblique and this is my straight. But obviously maybe that's not going to come at the first time. The teacher does have to go back and say, maybe slanted is your oblique, and then your right, like the ones that are just straight, is your right. And then so collect and display here is that the teacher, while they're doing this, while they're in partners or in groups, the teacher is walking around and jotting down notes of like, okay, this student said slanted. Let me go back to the group and say, okay, we have a slanted category. Another word for slanted is oblique, and that would be our category. And then those vocabulary words would be displayed somewhere around the room for the students to reference back. And just the supports for English language learners, so like collecting and displaying deeperly is more like listening for and collect the language that the students are using, write the students' words and phrases on a visual display, and for example, so the tip of the cone is x of the cone, so the phrase the pyramid is slanted can be replaced, as I said, with the altitude of the pyramid, does not pass through the center of the base. And this is the other activity, building a prism for pyramids. So this activity requires students to build a prism out of 3 pyramids and make an educated guess about the volume. So this helps later for when the students find the formula to find the volume of the pyramids. This is a great hands-on activity with tangible materials, which is great for MLL students. So the students they get 3 of these. This is just one example, but they get 3 of them. And then they're able to use tape or whatever the teacher can offer for them to be able to do their own shape, which then would look something like this. And then they are able to put it all together, and then there comes that conversation again of discussion of like what happened, what did we do, and all that good stuff. So discussion supports. This routine provides the language function and sentence stems to involve students in meaningful mathematical conversations. And so if you see here, we have a few examples. So in order to describe, you might be able to tell the kids, okay, it looks like what, or I noticed that. Then same thing with explain. First, I did whatever because, or I tried. And then we have justifies, generalize, critique, compare and contrast, represent and interpret. And all of this will help our MLS students be able to have that meaningful discussion. Then so as the teacher gives these sentence frames to the students, they are able to produce language, and the teacher can guide them to use that academic language. So not necessarily it being academic language right away, but the fact that the student can produce language and then the teacher can transform it into academic language. And then, so these are just our ML students in geometry class.
Okay, so we also did an Algebra I lesson, and this was out of our Unit 5, and it was our Lesson 3. And in this lesson, students are learning the term growth factor and review the term exponent. And they represent the relationship using a table, an expression, and a graph. So I chose this lesson because I realized that one of our students didn't understand what an exponent was or how they worked. So I thought this would be a good one to do. Okay, so the learning targets were, I can explain the connection between an equation and a graph that represents, and I could put shows in there, exponential growth, and then I can write and interpret or understand an equation that represents exponential growth. So some mathematical vocabulary. Exponent is not one of the given vocabulary words, but some of our ML students may not understand where the exponent is or what it means when it comes to multiplying. So a picture would be very helpful. Growth factor is our vocabulary word. And then expression and equation. It asks them to write expressions and equations, so they need to understand that an expression does not have an equal sign, but an equation does. Okay, so the first activity, and for this lesson, each part of the lesson, there was a built-in ML support in the curriculum, which is one of the things we are wanting to bring to the attention of our teachers in the building. So the first one was a math talk, and it's about exponent rules. And so they're supposed to be rewriting these expressions as a power of 2. And so they have to know whether they have to understand that they're going to add if they're multiplying, and then they're going to subtract the exponents if they are dividing. This was from an earlier grade, but many of our students may not know this. So the first IM support for our multilingual learners was discussion supports. And it was display a sentence frame. So I noticed that first and this is to help them explain a strategy. They can rehearse with a partner, which they're using their language and can build their confidence before sharing with the class. Some other supports that a teacher could do, they may use that picture to explain exponent, and then after the activity, make sure maybe there's a picture of how to actually represent with the base of 2, that you add the exponents when multiplying and subtract them when you are dividing. The next activity is an optional activity, and I know when I taught 6th grade IM math, the optional activity, when you're on a pacing schedule, sometimes you're like, do I do it? But this was a really good one, I felt, because again, you are utilizing the rules for exponents. So they had to complete the table using the power that's given, and then they had to actually come up with the missing exponent for a multiplication and a division problem, and then they also had to understand what a base to the 0 power would be. So this one had the clarify, critique, and correct support built in, and it wants them to clarify if something, it suggests presenting the students with an incorrect answer, and then they need to figure out what's wrong with it, critique it, find the wrong numbers, why is it not right, and then correct the answer. And this will help students maybe improve their written mathematical arguments and help them understand the power of 0. And the clarify, critique, and correct, how does it support the language demands of the task and support developmental of mathematical understanding? It touches on all of our domains: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And it's helping them represent, and they're conversing on this. So all the domains are brought into this. Some additional supports for that is, again, it reviews the base to a 0 power. that it equals to 1. Teachers could demonstrate, just how to multiply the exponents. And then an incorrect equation that the teachers could give would be like 9 to the 4th power times 9 to the 2nd power equals 9 to the 7th power. And they would need to realize and come to the conclusion that it should be 9 to the 6th power and not 9 to the 7th. Okay, now this one, it's a lot of words on a page. So they've got a biology lab with 500 bacteria reproducing by splitting, and they have to write expressions. They have to write an equation, and then they have to use the equation to find the number of bacteria when the time is 0, and what does that mean. The ML supports in the curriculum were the collect and display. So invite students to discuss their thinking. And with a partner, they're going to listen for vocabulary that they can collect and put on the board. And so as the teacher is starting to put words on the board, the students can be saying, "Oh, I like that word," and use it as part of their answer. And then there's also, I thought they needed a picture for what does it mean bacteria dividing, and so this would show that the first time there's 2, and then each of those 2 continue to divide, and kind of let them understand what that means. Some additional supports, it just looks overwhelming. Teachers could show an example for the first hour or a practice of bacteria doubling, how to write the first one. Parasite is a word in question number 2, maybe confusing, so maybe a picture would help with that as well. And they will greatly benefit from working with a partner or a group. And then teachers need to make sure that students all have the correct answers before moving on to the next part, because they will need those correct answers to graph. So then they are presented with 2 graphs, and they are going to be required to figure out which equation would go with which graph. And then a built-in support was the collect and display again. So this helps students describe the meaning of variables in their equations. They should work with a partner and give them some sentence frames to use. Each partner can use the sentence frames, and this works not only for our ML students but for all students to give them a start on how to answer the questions. It helps them, they can justify how the features of the graph can be used to identify the matching equations. So every lesson ends with a cool down, which tests students on their understanding of the lesson. So this one, they're representing exponential growth, and it was mice in the forest, and a group of biologists, they're surveying mice, and they're given an equation, and the students have to explain what the 75 and the 3 mean in this situation. So I would, if I was doing that, and I used to do this for my 6th graders as well, I would let them know that you have 2 things to answer there, because students sometimes forget to read further. They'll only do one part. So I gave them a sentence starter for each of the 2 parts of the question that they have to answer.
And just overall, our job is not done yet. This was a great information gathering year in which we learned a lot and shared a lot, not only with teachers, but also admin and specialists. And this was all thanks to being part of the Teacher Academy.
And looking ahead, we want to continue working with the math department, but also expand to other departments in the school, because all teachers are language teachers. And through our meaningful collaboration with other teachers in the building, our ML students will further their English proficiency as they continue their education at Smyrna High School.
Thank you all for listening to us today.